Hello everybody and welcome to Scalable Scripts YouTube channel. In this video you will learn how to refactor a given code step by step. I have taken some example code and I will show you all the steps to be followed to refactor it. This is the example code that we need to refactor. This is a tennis game between two players that shows the result of the match in tennis points. Let's see how it's used. First we create the tennis game and then we call the getScore method with player1 name, player2 name, player1 score and player2 score. Then we echo the object to display the score. We can see now that this solution is not intuitive at all, and that's our job, to change it. Let's first see if the class works as expected. Write PHP tennis.php and it displays 3040. This is a correct result. The result is correct and the code works fine. Now let's analyze the getScore method. There are three cases of the game results. First, when the scores are equal, show the message love all. In case they are both 0, show 15 all. When are both 1, show 31, etc. In the case of player scores greater than 4, we get the difference, and if the difference is 1, we display the advantage for the player. If the difference is greater or equal to 2, we show win for the player, and the else condition, we display the regular results for the players. Let's do our first refactoring. The first thing I will do is change this getScore method here. This is not intuitive at all. When you call a get method, you expect to return the value and not to echo the actual object to get the result. So I will change this into an echo here and remove the object. This means I have to remove this toString method here because it fires when we echo the object. Now we need to return the score variable. Let's test the code, and it works as expected. Now we need to change one last thing. We don't need this score variable here because the score variable is used inside this function and nowhere else, so we can create a local variable and remove this one. Let's add the local variable score and replace this score with the variable score. I will take a shortcut with IntelliJ. Now that I made the replace, everything looks fine. Let me test it. Everything works as expected. Let's start refactoring the code now. Let's first simplify our if conditions. As you can see here, we have a condition if the scores are equal, then an if condition when the scores are greater than 4, and an else here for all the other cases. All these cases are distant for each other. If one happens, the other doesn't, so we can simplify the if conditions by returning the score directly in the if. Let me show how to do it. We will return the score here. Then we don't need this else here, so remove it. And we can return the score here too. And now we can remove this else here, and we can see that our conditions are simplified a lot. We have one if case here that returns the score. For all the other cases, it will pass here. Sometimes we put lots of parameters in our methods that belong to the same object. For example, we call this getScore method here, and we have the player1 name and the player1 score, then the player2 name and the player2 score. Usually, it can happen that we have a method that can have more than 4 or 5 parameters, and that's not a good practice. The way to solve this problem is to extract an object that contains all the necessary parameters. Let's create one now. I will create the class player that has 2 parameters, name and score. I will also create the constructor that has the name and the score parameter. I will strongly type them. This is a string and this is an integer. Then I will set the class attributes into these parameters. Now let's use this class to replace all the variables inside this method. First, let's create the players. Player1 equals to new player. The name will be player1 and the score will be 2. Player2 equals to new player again with the name player2 and the score 3. Now let's replace these parameters with player1 and player2. This gives us an error because we haven't changed the variables here. Write player, player1 here and player, player2 here. Let's replace all the player1 scores with player1 score and we will do the same with player2. We do the same for the names. Now we can see that the parameters are more understandable. We have two players here. Each player has a name and a score, and then we make the calculation and display the right result. This is much more cleaner now. Let's replace conditionals with object-oriented programming. We have three cases here. When the players' scores are equal, we'll return a result based on equal score. When the scores are greater than 4, I will call this the endgame score and will return advantage for the player or win for the player. In the end, we'll just display the current score. I will call it the regular score. Let's create this object now. Let's cut this code here and create an object. Create a class called equalScore. This class will have the toString method to show the score. We can see that we need the player, so let's create an attribute player1 and let's add the constructor that accepts the player. Let's add this player1 to player1 attribute and change this to this player1 score equals score. Here we will just return new equals score with player1 variable. Now let's do the same for this code here. Let's create a class called Endgame Score. We'll add a toasting method inside it and we'll paste this code. Now we need both of the players. Copy this code here and we will paste it here. Also add player2 here. Add player2 in constructor 2. Replace the variables with this player1 and this player2. So let's return this object new endgame score and we need both player1 and player2. Now we cut this code and create the regular score class. Add the toString function and we also add the players here. Replace player variables with this player 1 and this player 2. Set the score variable as an empty string so it doesn't give us an error here. Now we only need to return the regular score here with player 1 and player 2 as attributes. Remove this variable here and we can see that our method looks much more cleaner and understandable. We have the case to return the equal score, the endgame score and regular score. Let's try now if this code works. Write in terminal PHP, tennis.php, and we got an error here. Let's check it. I forgot to add the player 2 here, so let's add it. And also add it in the constructor here. Let's try it again and the score is correct. Let us try another case with the equal ones, so change the values here. That's correct too. Let's try another case now. So the code works fine. So till now we created the equal score, the endgame score and regular score cases. So if we want to create another score type, we need to copy this code again, which is not very practical. In order to not duplicate the code, we will need to create another parent class that all these classes will extend and have all the common code. Let's create it now. It will be an abstract class called score and will contain this part of the code. Now all the score classes that we created will extend the score class and we will need to remove this part of our code. Let's make the changes to all our classes. Now let me explain a bit why I used an abstract class. Abstract classes can only be extended and cannot be instantiated. I cannot create, for example, the score equals to new score class because it's not allowed. The main purpose of abstract classes is to be extended by other classes, so they can get common functionalities. If you can see, all the score classes have in common that the toString method. We will make it required for all of them and add this method inside our abstract class as an abstract function. So what I did here is that every class that extends the score class will need to implement this function. Otherwise, it will throw an error. For example, if we remove this method here, you will see an error message because it needs to implement a toString method. As next step, we have to synchronize all classes so they look much more cleaner. One last change will be to add the player2 to equals score class. It does not need the player2, but it's not a problem in this case. Now it's time to refactor the if statements. As you can see here, it is a connection between number 0 and love1 and 15, 2 and 30 and 340. You can see the same in the regular score here. 0 and love, 1 and 15, 2 and 30 and 340. The best way to combine all together is via an array. Let's create a constant in the score class. Write const, I will call it values, equals to an array. So let's add the connections now. 0 is related with love, 1 is related with 15, 2 is related with 30, and 3 is related with 40. Now that we added the values, let's use it in our code. First, create a function to simulate the switch statements. I will call it getScore and it has a score parameter. So, to simulate the switch case, this will be the score and this will be the value we need to return. So, it is as simple as return score values and score here. Keep in mind that score can be out of range of these values here, so we need to add a condition and return an empty string in the case that score values do not exist. Let's simulate this function now. We can see here that the pattern is the value of the score minus all. In case it doesn't exist, we return those. So the solution is really simple. We'll get the score here, which is this getScore, this player1 score. So we'll return score if it has a value, so it is not an empty string, we will return score concatenated with minus all. Otherwise, if it's an empty string, we will return those. So at the end, all that big switch statement is returned into 2 lines of code. Let's do the same for the regular score. The idea here is we have 2 players and the result can be one of these values minus the second player value. Now that we created the function, it's really simple to simulate it. We can just do it like this. Return this getScore, this player1 score, concatenate it with minus and we'll concatenate it with player2 score. This is just that simple. 2 big switch statements changed to a more solid code. Let's try our code now and check different results for different values and see if everything works. So after everything works fine, it's time to refactor the Endgame score class. The code here is not that bad, but there is a better way to show advantage for the player or win for the player by using less conditions. Let's remove this code. First, get the difference, so this player1 score minus this player2 score. In case the difference is positive, the player 1 has the advantage. Otherwise, the player 2 has the advantage. Let's create a variable name here, which is equal to diff. If diff is greater than 0, then get player 1 name, otherwise get player 2 name. Now we need to know if it's an advantage or a win. So the condition was, if 1 it's an advantage, otherwise it's a win. But first we need to check if div variable is positive or negative. There's a way to make it always positive by using the absolute value of div, and now we can add our condition. The condition is concatenated with the player's name. Let's open again the terminal to check the result and make some tests for different cases. So everything works correctly. At the end, we got rid of a really messy code and now we have a more clean now. Thank you for watching our video, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more upcoming programming tutorials. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to leave them in the comment section below. See you in the next video.